Hi, and welcome to a special episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. From the 16th to the 19th of May, we blanketed the Bitcoin 2013 conference in San Jose, California. Until we can get all this content from our hard drives to your ears, you can expect frequent releases of interviews from the show. Today, I'm pleased to bring you a security-focused double interview show with two very interesting gentlemen. Later in this episode, I speak with Alan Reiner, lead at Armory Wallet, my personal favorite in the space. During our wide-ranging conversation, we talk about multi-part backups, multi-signer wallets, the teeter-totter of security versus ease of use, moving enormous Armory to Android, open source to full-time, pioneering in a new space, and Armory for altcoins. But first, I join Rob Benegali of the Gli.ph secure communications platform, where we discuss granular identity control, cloaked email addresses, Bitcoin integration, playing the VC game, lockdown security, online wallets, password recovery versus true security, and lots more.
Been around for about a year and a half now. It's a startup out of Portland, Oregon. And what we've built is what we call an identity platform. And what that means is that you can store your personal information in it and you can connect with other users. But the exciting feature that we announced today that is on the front page of Pando Daily right now is the ability to send Bitcoin to other people really easily. So we have a chat interface, like a normal texting interface, and it's secure. It's a secure texting environment. And you can attach Bitcoin to a message as easily as you do a picture message. So it's pretty cool, and we just brought it online this morning.
So now, we've been talking kind of over your platform for the last 2 weeks or so while we've been getting ready for this interview. It's like a secure identity platform that does the text messaging like you're saying, but it also has a couple of other elements to it. One of them is, the name is Gli.ph, and one of the things that is sort of unique about it is that rather than having a name-based identity, de facto, so like my email is adam@letstalkbitcoin.com, instead of that, I have a couple of pictograms basically that I've picked for myself and used to identify myself on the network. And then if somebody wants to find me, instead of looking for my name, they look for that particular combination. They search for that particular combination that I give them. So how did that come about? What was the decision that led you to the Gli.ph system?
That's a good question. This is very early on. We knew we wanted to have something very novel because we'd be launching something that was fairly unfamiliar. I mean, why would you need a digital identity? This is back in January of 2011. And we wanted to have something that would kind of be interesting and cool and very consumer oriented because we knew we wanted to have something that people on Craigslist would feel like they could pick up. The Gli.ph, Gli.ph, it's spelled that way, is actually short for hieroglyph. So it's got a weird misspelling there. But, and that's kind of a reference to these symbol-based usernames. We think it's really a cool way to show off who you are, but also we wanted to provide a way for people to be identified without providing personal information. So now you're comfortable sharing adam@letstalkbitcoin.com. But if your email address is adam.levine@gmail.com, I hope it's not. I hope I didn't just give it away. But if it was, you might not want that out there on anybody you meet. It may be that you want to connect with somebody, but you don't want to share your email address with them. And that's totally cool. There should be no reason not to do that. And so we came up with this as a creative way around that, to provide a way for people, a handle that people could use instead of a letters and numbers way to do it.
Talking about the platform, once you have that identity, then you can do more than just messaging with it. You mentioned Craigslist, and one of the use scenarios that we talked about pretty early on in this conversation was the idea that Craigslist doesn't protect you as a user from having essentially your email get out to somebody who just responds in kind of a non-committal way. It might make sense for them to have your real email at some point in the conversation, but not necessarily early on. And so you have a product that you call Shrouds or Cloaks.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do those work? How does that protect your identity while still being a functional form of communication?
Well, you brought up an important question, which is protecting your privacy on Craigslist. In the past has been a challenge. Usually what happened was you would get one side of it, anonymity, but once you replied, it would reveal your email address. And sometimes spammers would use, replies to just collect email addresses, and it was a problem. Now, interestingly, we launched this product in August. It's called Cloaked Email, and it was for Craigslist, and it worked great, and people loved it, and it still does. Although in November, Craigslist started testing their own two-way email anonymizing service, which we were a little bit surprised to see on the heels of ours because Craigslist doesn't innovate very quickly. So they did recently build it in. If you sign up for some startup, eBay, whatever, Amazon, you can use a Gli.ph cloaked email to do it. We built that product in part to help get traction around our core identity and messaging tool. We needed to build something that was useful that was kind of outside of our ecosystem that would interface with the outside world. And that's kind of what we really built it for. But it still fits in really well with some core values we have, which is helping people preserve their privacy when they want to.
When we're talking about the messaging system and you're talking about controlling your identity and controlling, your privacy, basically, one of the things that comes into that is that they're encrypted both ways, right? I mean, this is a system where it's kind of impossible to intercept, whereas with standard text messages, that's not really the case.
Right, absolutely. That's a really core aspect of it. So I mentioned privacy, but security is really important as well. And we think that sometimes those things go hand in hand. And that kind of, what Glyph does is when you create an account, it creates a set of public and private keys behind the scenes. And when you connect with someone, for instance, you and I are connected on Glyph right now, it encrypts the data that's shared between us before it's stored on the server. So, and when it's in transit, it's protected by SSL. And so the connection, the data passing from the device to the server is encrypted. And before it's saved to the server for lookup later, it's also encrypted. Now, that means that we can do some really interesting things. One of them is that we offer the ability to securely delete messages. So since it's hosted messaging, you can delete a message permanently. And if you delete it, it deletes it on my end too.
Right.
And we don't mark messages as deleted on our server in our database. We delete them. They're gone. So that's really cool. And it's actually used quite a bit on Glyph today. Another thing that we've got that's more related to the cryptography we're discussing is that we have this thing called lockdown privacy. So what this is something you may have seen on some other services more recently. But what it does is you can turn off password reset. This isn't commonly understood by people, but if you forget your password and your data is encrypted, the only way for you to reset your password is if the server has some additional higher level master password to decrypt your data and re-encrypt it using the newly chosen password. So what we do is we allow you to say, look, if I forget my password, my data can be gone. I'm okay with that. And what that means is that even Glyph administrators, or if, we have technicians down the line, they can't possibly decrypt your data if you've turned on this feature. And we actually allow you, so you and I can turn on lockdown individually on our accounts, and I can see that you have it turned on, and you can see that I have it turned on. And so it allows us to have a very strong comfort of feeling that if for some reason our database was hacked, it'd be very unfortunate, but if that was to happen, or if, say, our data was requested by a third party and we were compelled to give that data over, that it would be protected.
Right.
And so that's a pretty exciting feature about something we've built.
That is interesting. And it's interesting that you've taken it from kind of both ways, where it's not on by default, but if it's something that people want to do, then they can opt in. So, I mean, because it seems like when it comes to these secure communication platforms that are ultimately enabled by a third party, because you're talking about hosted messages, which means that they functionally live in the cloud, instead of on a relative device. Now, let me ask about that.
Sure.
Even when I was we've been kind of floating from Wi-Fi point to Wi-Fi point with my iPad, and even when we were not in contact, I was still able to see the messages that I had already downloaded. So once they're downloaded, they're then hosted on the local machine?
So depending on the device, there's limited caching. I think we cache for up to 10 minutes on the device, but we so far have not completely trusted the secure space on the device to allow them to be cached permanently.
Okay.
And that's part of the security that we've built.
Okay.
But you brought up a good point, which is that there's always compromises between the user experience and the level of security you provide. It might be kind of heavy-handed to force lockdown on everyone because people forget passwords.
Right.
I know because people reset passwords on Glyph.
Right.
And I reset passwords. So there's always these difficult choices to make. And one of the things we do is try to at least offer the ability for advanced or power users to get the high level of security or privacy they want. And it's always a challenge to say, what does the default look like?
Have you guys conceptualized, you've functionally reinvented the username with the Glyph system. So is there any thought about reinventing the password experience with the Glyph system or something else? I mean, it just seems like, you're right. People forget their passwords. I, try to be security conscious, but even I repeat passwords in certain places just because there's only so many, 10-digit alphanumeric, non-word things that I can keep in my head at a time. So have you guys looked at any options for that?
That's a really good question. Password situation is a really hard one. I mean, I think the best people who are doing the best job at it right now are like 1Password. I use them for a lot. I think that even Mozilla has a recent identity thing that they're doing that has, I'm not very familiar with it, but I believe is an attempt at trying to resolve some aspects of password. I mean, when it comes down to it, you look at something like Google Plus and Facebook, and where they offer, what do they call this? Federated identity, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Where you can use these other services to basically authorize yourself into other people.
Right.
And then you don't have to remember many of them. You just have to do an OAuth or whatever, OAuth 2 in order to do it. In fact, that's how we connect to Coinbase for our Bitcoin thing.
So, transitioning back into the Bitcoin topic. So we played around with that feature a little bit, and it does require a Coinbase account.
That's right. At this point, it does.
Are there any plans? So you said at this point it does. Mm-hmm. What's the future plan for this? Are you planning on integrating your own version of the Bitcoin API so you can do it directly, or is the plan to use a third-party enabler because that's not really the business that you're in?
Well, let's just to talk about Coinbase for a second. First, I mean, we're really excited about Coinbase and what they've done. I mean, first, Brian and his small team so far have created a massively scaling product. And they also built an API that works and an interface that I think is perhaps the most user-friendly right now, if you compare it really to Gox, which is really, I think, the competitor to them, which is kind of amazing.
For how much longer, though? No one knows.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier, I think, it was to send on Coinbase. Previously, Coinbase directly was the easiest way to send Bitcoin online using their email system. Hopefully what we've done is taken that and augmented it to make it even easier using Glyph. But we are very happy with Coinbase. And the reason we chose them was because they had a published API that was supported, and they were fairly responsive and getting back to us. So we were really pleased with Coinbase. Even though a lot of people, I think they've taken a lot of heat in the community. But what I've seen is that it works. And if you want to build on top of Coinbase as a developer, you can be successful doing that. And also, I found that Brian Armstrong himself has been accessible to us. So that's been really cool. Now, what can we do next? There are other e-wallets out there to integrate with. And when it
well, let me interrupt you here. So I have no problem with Coinbase. I have a problem with online wallets.
Okay, sure.
See, so
we talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the thing is, it doesn't really matter to me which online wallet you're using. They're all fine. I, respect all the people who are doing them. And I think that it's a service that certainly some people demand. But I think that the security element of it, we've kind of already seen that even with two-factor authentication, blockchain wallets get busted all the time, and they have two-factor, and so I just don't really see how you get around that so long as you have so much value centralized onto these online sites.
Right. Well, I think there's a bunch of stuff there. So one thing is there's a general operational security issue on PCs today. I mean, there's malware. I mean, I think what you're talking about is mostly a lot of malware has been causing blockchain stuff to get attacked. Blockchain's been attacked because the machines themselves either have keyloggers or some other thing. My understanding is that blockchain itself has not been compromised, but other methods, either social engineering or otherwise, has caused those accounts to occasionally be taken over.
I guess what I'm just saying is that, you hear about people getting their accounts robbed. You hear about that a little bit on desktop clients. The vast majority of what you hear about is online clients. Sure. So that makes me think that, it's the centralization of value that makes them targets. And it doesn't really, so you're right. I mean, it probably is keyloggers on specific machines.
Right.
I mean, that's something that I've definitely been seeing is that as kind of Bitcoin has been ramping up, there are a lot of tainted links going around, and people are getting, people are like visiting a news site and it's downloading something real scary to them just because they went through a funky link to it, or because those sites are compromised. So, I mean, we're kind of talking in circles here, but
I mean, let me jump back in because you mentioned, I think you're right. First, it is kind of a concern to centralize a lot of money in a wallet. My analogy I'd use is, when you walk out the door of your home with your real wallet your physical wallet, that has cash, fiat money in it. How much are you willing to walk out the door with in case something happens? I mean, most likely you're going to lose your wallet. I mean, I don't know another person who hasn't lost their wallet at some point. So how much you only keep as much money, and you learn from it. You learn from those experiences, and you only keep as much money in your wallet as you're willing to lose, right? So I might take, if you're doing really well and you're very comfortable, you might have $200 with you at all times. I know some people who do something like that, but I personally wouldn't even carry that much money with me. I would treat a e-wallet, at least at this point, as more like your real wallet. I mean, how many transactions, what kind of value transactions with Bitcoin are you going to be doing where you need to have a lot of Bitcoin available at all times from your phone or from, and so what I would say is, at least for now, and perhaps even going in the future, you wouldn't keep vast sums. You keep, if you've got many Bitcoin, you keep that offline. I just don't see a good reason to keep it in there. And as our best practices that we suggest in using Glyph with Coinbase, same thing. We don't recommend you keep a lot of money in, a lot of Bitcoin in Coinbase at any time. It's just, you could be potentially setting yourself up for dealing with, you're making yourself a target.
Right. That makes sense. So I interrupted you when you were going to talk about what's going to come next.
About the wallets.
About the wallets. Yeah, I'm real curious.
Sure. Well, I mean, right now we're very focused on getting the experience right around Coinbase. We actually have work to do to improve the error messaging right now. We want to improve a bunch of different things. This is our first. We had to get this out the door right in time for the conference. So you're going to see, before you see more action on wallets, you're going to see a user experience iteration or two. But following that, we love blockchain. I think blockchain was more like, it feels like it was more built for Bitcoin people first, and then they introduced the wallet almost as a way to stay on top of it. And the fact that they allow you to export your wallet and keep it offline and take it out, that's great. But they still offer an API at blockchain. BIPs out of Europe also offers an API. So those are places where we could we would look to integrate both of those. They're both strong wallets, and I would look to see that we would go that direction.
Want to have an online store that accepts Bitcoins? Just go to www.openbitcoinstore and you can have a store up and running before the end of this message. Just enter your email address and the store name, and in less than 30 seconds, you'll have a secure WordPress e-commerce site up and running that accepts Bitcoins and pays you in cash within 24 hours. And best of all, it's completely free. Visit www.openbitcoinstore.com today and open for business now. Let's Talk Bitcoin is heard each week by thousands of people who are participating in the new digital economy. Our listener base of Bitcoin owners, miners, investors, technologists, and merchants is growing fast. We offer a limited number of short advertising slots in each show to keep our listeners engaged and to provide maximum impact for our sponsors. If you'd like to talk to us about Let's Talk Bitcoin, send us an email at sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
Great conversations going, and I was like, it would be fun to kind of mess with the podcast by playing some funny sounds during your podcast. So I was I had an app, but I was just going to try and throw some gongs in and stuff, and really try and
I think we got enough of the ambient.
Okay. I do have, I don't know how close we are to the end, but I want to make sure I get it to you. I've got a gift.
You can talk for as long as you want.
Okay, well, I've got a gift for you here, and I wanted to give it to you live on the podcast.
Okay.
So I'm going to get it. You might have to edit it for a second while I rummage around.
That's fine. Let's see.
You're the first person to get one of these. I brought them specifically for the conference. Here you go.
That's great. It's a button that says Fun Meter on it, Bitcoin 2013. And you can move it from minimum to medium to maximum, which is the red level. So one of the other announcements that came out today was that you've been accepted into the Boost VC fund and the Bitcoin program there.
That's right.
So now, how did that come about? Did you approach them? Did they approach you? Was there an application process that you went through? Because it sounds like this is a pretty in-depth program that you're going to be going through, where you're literally moving your headquarters to theirs.
That's right.
And so, can you tell me a little bit about that? I'm not sure how these incubators work.
Sure. So, it's probably worth mentioning that we went through one seed incubator first at the beginning of this last year in Portland called the Portland Seed Fund. And that was just that got us kind of company going and started us with some initial mentorship and got the company really moving. I heard about Boost VC while searching. Reading Bitcoin Talk and searching the web. Adam Draper is one of the managing directors and founders of Boost VC. So adamdraper.com, he's got a blog entry, and he's like, we love Bitcoin, and we're going to make a portion of our new class at Boost VC. This is their second class, so it's a fairly new accelerator focused on Bitcoin. And I saw that, and my eyes lit up because we were already in development on this Bitcoin integration for Glyph. And so I actually hunted down their previous class, all 10 of them, and cold emailed all of them and was like, I'd love to talk to you about Boost. And I got 3 meetings with those folks. And then one of them offered to make an intro to Adam and Brayton, the 2 founders of Boost, which was awesome. And I went down to the valley because I had to make the trip down. And I actually met with a couple of different VCs, angels, while I was down here. But my meeting with Adam and Brayton went very successfully. I was able to demo what we released today. This was well over a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And we just gotten it working. It was kind of like twine and gum holding it together, but It did work, and it did make Coinbase money move, and it was cool. And they were very excited. It was a great meeting. We followed up a couple of times. He met my co-founder, Nick Ash, and it kind of just went from there. It was pretty organic, but I mean, I'll be frank. I mean, I hunted these guys down.
So like a month ago.
I mean, it was probably about 6 weeks ago, something like that.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast progress. So it sounds like the association with Bitcoin and Glyph has really been a very positive thing for you guys.
I'd say absolutely. And I just barely, I mean, when you walked in the door, I just got started reading that Pando Daily article, but it actually says at the very beginning of it that our company was looking for a use case and then Bitcoin sailed in. And that's actually kind of true. I mean, security and privacy is not very well valued by the general mainstream audiences in the public right now.
Well, that's been kind of my interpretation of it too, is that, like I jumped on it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is easy and I can use it both on my computer because I've been using your web application, which is basically, a virtualized phone. And then also I've been using it on my tablet and my phones. And, trying to get my people onto the system has been a challenge. Of the 5 or 6 people I've been like, hey, you should be on this. I'd like to use this with you. I think maybe 2 have signed up, something like that.
Right.
So do you think that Bitcoin is your killer app here? That's the thing that makes this all work?
Maybe at the very beginning you mentioned it's hard to get people on a Glyph right now. We feel that for real. Like we want this to be an easy way to connect with your friends and get people online. One is the user experience has got to be improved to iMessage level speed, and it's got to be super snappy, and we will continue to work on that. Another thing that's hard in getting people online is we are very focused on privacy. So we don't do things like read your address book or spam all your contacts like LinkedIn. There's a lot of things that could be done by our service that we have the technical capability to do, but we're specifically holding back on because we want to build this more organically. Also, we're still building the product and making sure it's right. So I want to just address it. When it comes down to getting people on to Glyph, it's not as easy as message me or WhatsApp right now, but that's somewhat on purpose. And I think you're going to see it improve, especially over the incubation at Boost this summer. So we're going to be focusing on making the onboarding experience easier. So I feel your pain. Just held up my thumb like Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
I feel your pain on that, and we'll be working very hard to make it easier. So anybody listening who's trying Glyph and is like, heck, I can't get the Glyph I want or whatever, I hope that you'll tough through it for now and you'll stick with us while we make it easier to use.
Well, we talked about that too, because the process of finding someone, or the process of sending someone your Glyph, is sort of a manual process right now, where like I know that for one of the people that I talked to, I literally wrote out the names of my Glyphs, which I can't remember now, actually.
Yes, that is an issue. I mean, the one thing that we want to do is it's called discoverability. So we right now don't allow you to be discoverable by your email address. So you can't say search for Adam at your email address and have it pop up. Now we are likely to we're going to look at ways in order to make it easier for people to choose to be discoverable if they want. We'll always allow people to be completely shrouded, as you used your word earlier, if they'd like. But we do need to improve discoverability for sure. And also the ability to communicate your Glyph. We do have a few of these for our company. We've got some business cards that have only the Glyphs. And we call these symbols artifacts. So the symbols themselves are artifacts, and the collection of artifacts is your Glyph. So that might make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
If you want to meet somebody.
I think so. This is a cool product. I really hope that you succeed with it.
Thanks.
I think that one of the things that you're running up against, and you mentioned it earlier in the interview, that there are just some inherent conflicts between discoverability and privacy, and that that's an aspect that we haven't talked about. One of the interesting things that I thought about Glyph is that not only is it really kind of granular identity control, right? Where you have this really generic, can't tell that it's you, site anonymous identity to start in the Glyph system. But then you move from that and you can populate with information. You can populate with your real name, your Twitter, your real email address. And on a person by person, piece of information by piece of information basis, you can choose what you want to reveal and when you want to reveal it. Is that true of the Bitcoin address too?
Yeah. So you hit on something really important here. And I guess we haven't really covered this yet in the talk. It feels like at first that Glyph is designed for people who don't want anyone to know who they are and to really allow for anonymous and very, very private stuff. But actually what we're interested is in the full spectrum of relationships. So there are very trusted ones like you and I've shared my phone number facet with you and you shared yours with mine on Glyph. We trust each other enough to share personal information. That is information about your identity that helps us to develop our relationship further. So to the point where let's say that I owed you money. I would have no problem sending you Bitcoin right now because I know that that's Adam on the other side of this glyph connection. Now that's something that you don't necessarily get out of the Bitcoin protocol overall.
Right.
Bitcoin isn't necessarily meant to offer identity around the wallet addresses. And so what we're really trying to do and the vision that we have moving forward is to allow people to take and develop a real digital identity that the wallet addresses can be connected to. So that if you're meeting somebody online, let's say that you aren't even going to be able to meet them in person, you can have a way to at least be more comfortable with who they are, that it's a legitimate real person. And that means that we'll be looking at ways to help allow for validation of personal data. And to focus on that briefly, if you've been following Airbnb, for example, they did I think Airbnb is perhaps the greatest example of peer-to-peer marketplace that's developed next to Lyft, where people are literally staying in each other's homes because they trust each other enough to do so. That's something that, our entire team is very excited about as a peer-to-peer sharing economy and what can happen around that. And the only way to really come to the point where you're willing to share with a stranger is to trust them a little bit. And that means revealing information about yourself. So what we really want to do with Glyph is allow people, when it's recent, when they want to open up, to share more information about themselves so that you can do more. Because if you can trust somebody, then you can ride with them in their car, you could stay at their home, you could buy a piece of electronics and know it's not going to be a lemon right away, or that if it is, they're going to be somebody who would help you out with that. And if we're going to be more efficient as a society and we're going to be more community-based, which is, I think, the direction that we're headed, then we're going to need mechanisms, electronic mechanisms for us to connect with each other and come to trust strangers. And that's really something we're after. Now, the cool thing about Bitcoin is that you can have that spectrum. You can, I don't know you, to I know this person really well. And what we're looking to do is trying to address that directly.
So there are two follow-ups here, and then I think I'm out of questions.
Okay.
The first one is, you're talking about identity, and yet you have functionally a closed system. Are there any plans to offer an API so that, say, if I wanted to use my glyph as a forum identity and I didn't want to necessarily attach my real name to it, is that something that, that your system will eventually, accommodate? Mm-hmm. Or are you more focused entirely on this, on everything living inside of the glyph application and it being able to route, messages and Bitcoin and all these other things? Or is there a plan to expand it out so it can be used in other formats?
That's a good question. So one thing is that we really believe in data portability and the ownership of personal data. So we don't lay claim to your data if it belongs to you. We would, you can look at our privacy policy and our terms. We will never sell or market your data. It's up to you to decide who you share with and when. And that's a very unique aspect of our business is we don't have an advertising based business. We don't monetize your data. It's in fact encrypted. So we couldn't make AdWords off of it, for example. To open your question directly about whether we'll open it up. I'd love to open up the, Glyph platform to developers to build on. We need to keep working to make it robust and useful first. But I believe in a future where we will be allowing that. Absolutely.
Okay. And then the other thing is almost more of a comment than anything else. People are talking about this sharing economy, and I think it's really interesting because, it's not like this is the first time it's happened. Mm-hmm. It's just like over the last maybe 15 years as the internet has become so pervasive, it's like we've lost it. It's like the relationships have transited online. Instead of having real friends, you have Facebook friends. And yeah, you have a lot more, but are they really your friends? Do you really know them?
Right.
So, I think I kind of agree with you. This is like almost like if you can get the identity question right, then you can almost bootstrap legitimate friendship into this kind of global local thing that we're doing. So, for you, is it about the global local?
I do think that there's a huge advocate for people connecting with people in their community. I think that by knowing your neighbor, we can be a better society through knowing each other better.
Do you know your neighbors?
I do know my neighbors.
Okay.
I'm not very well. I should connect with them on Glyph. But I guess I would comment that I think there's been a bunch of this. We saw this suburban thing happen, in the United States. There's an author, William Upsky Wimsett, who wrote this book called Bomb the Suburbs, which is kind of a violent sounding name for the book, but I recommend it to anyone on this podcast. It's a short book where he talks about urban areas being vacated as people moved out to the suburbs and where people had kind of isolated themselves. And I think that kind of that, right after we had the suburban expansion, we had the internet kind of come in and almost kind of like create an additional comfort blanket for being separated from other people. But as we have the mobile now, you can be anywhere you are, you can be connected. You can now go out to these places and still kind of have this internet experience. And I do think that that is going to help drive. It creates the opportunity for people to be connecting in person and then also have these online relationships. So I'm really excited about where that's going to go.
Everyone knows that offline storage is the only safe way to store your Bitcoins. Now there's an easy, convenient, and secure way to make Bitcoin wallets for safe offline storage. With the Safe Paper Wallet Kit, you get everything you need to print Bitcoin wallets using your own PC. Store them in a safe deposit box, your home safe, or even your sock drawer. Anything's more secure than keeping them online. Get your kit now at safepaperwallet.com.
I have tried to use like RSA encryption before, and I've used a clause, which is a derivative of, I believe, one of the Mozilla email clients.
Okay.
That has built-in RSA encryption, and it's a real pain in the and it's hard to use, and you wind up not using it because it's hard.
Yeah.
And so, so it seems like more than anything else, you're piling usability cases on here. You're adding the email, you're adding the Bitcoin, but at the core of it, it really is just this making secure communications and secure identity easy.
Yeah. I think I'd say the very broad goal would be to make glyph be a universal identity. That if somebody has a glyph, you can connect with them and you'll be able to share data, you'll be able to talk with them, can send money with them. There's all these great use cases that if I just knew their glyph, instead of like, if you have their phone number, you can call them or text them.
Right.
And both those can be tapped or recorded and they're not secure. So like, I think some of these traditional handles, these basically tiny identities, are antiquated. And I'd love to see glyph come in and replace all those. Absolutely.
So we're at the conference. What talk are you most excited about? Are you going to get to see any talks? Are you at the booth the whole time?
So I'm going to be at the booth a lot. So, I'll be there with our merch and stuff. I'm actually speaking on a panel on Saturday. There's a financial privacy and law enforcement panel. And we'll probably be talking about the DHS, which you already have talked about on your podcast here.
We haven't talked about it yet because we preloaded the shows.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's coming, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe before this, who knows? But we'll talk about DHS. So I'm excited about our own panel. But there's so many great speakers here. I'm looking forward to especially the funded entrepreneurs panel. So I think that both Brian's on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing those guys on stage and kind of getting, the moderator and the audience grilling. I think I saw calls on Bitcoin Talk for a lot of services to get up in front of us and kind of answer questions. So under public fire, under the audience fire, would be cool to observe that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about yourself? What are you looking forward to seeing?
Mostly I have meetings while I'm here.
You're busy.
Honestly, that's kind of the thing that's going on for me. I'm looking forward to meeting our listeners is what I'm doing. We have that at noon today, and then we're probably going to do another one tomorrow. As far as the panels are concerned, there's one that Stephanie's doing on charity, and I think that one's going to be real interesting because I think that the use scenarios.
What's that about?
It's basically about how Bitcoin. Well, this is kind of a theme that comes up over and over again for what we're talking about with Bitcoin. Is that the large users don't really have a lot of incentive because it's already easy for them. They're already integrated into existing payment processing networks. They're already, they already have enough scale that the little stuff kind of doesn't matter to them. But for people who start off small, like, the analogy here with charity is, if you've got a foundation that brings in $15 million a year, chances are pretty good that you have a staff that is in charge of, going out and soliciting donations and talking to potential large donors who can make stuff happen for you. And the bottom line is that beyond the charity part, you've also got the infrastructure part. And what happens is that with, small things, whether they be charities or whether, our podcast is another example of that, you don't really have the ability to devote all of your time to that or devote a whole bunch of people's time to solving that funding problem. So with Bitcoin, it's interesting because you have no costs functionally, since all the costs are borne by the person who's sending the transaction as opposed to the person who's receiving it. You don't necessarily have the same reporting requirements, although that's really something that's up for debate right now.
Sure.
And just in general, things get a lot easier because with Bitcoin, there basically is no minimum barrier to entry. It's like, it's like 0.01 cents as opposed to, you can equate, people don't really donate $2 to a charity, but you might donate 0.005 to a charity.
Right.
So, and that I think is, that's a really powerful concept, and it's powerful in the United States, but it's even more powerful as you get out of the United States and move into the third world where, there was a gentleman at the meetup last night who had just heard about Bitcoin in December in India and had flown in for the event and was saying, when are transaction fees going to be something so that when I send 200 rupees, I'm not paying 35 rupees in transaction fees?
Right.
And I think that those are the really interesting use scenarios where you're talking about remittances to people who have no real good way to do these things right now. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, to focus on your charity thing, I remember when the Haiti disaster, there was a SMS, donate to Red Cross via SMS. I think that was one of the first times where that went really big. And really what that was about was, and I can't imagine how much infrastructure and fees went into providing that service, but they reduced the friction to donate for the Haiti disaster. And people donated by text messaging in force. All you had to do was type in whatever it was, for Haiti or whatever, and send it to a particular SMS shortcode, and you donated like $5 or something. And that was amazing. It already shows that by reducing friction in payments, you can get money to places that are worthy and deemed necessary and good. And I think that like what you're saying, with Bitcoin, it reduces that barrier to entry by quite a bit. Now, it also introduces the need to make these services be able to demonstrate that they're legitimate and real charities, of course. That's the new challenge, of course.
Well, I don't think that's a new challenge. Actually, I think that, speaking about the Haiti situation in particular, you can see that an enormous amount of money went there, but a lot of the problems that they had, that generated the need haven't really been fixed with it. So I think that that's another interesting thing, is that with Red Cross, you have this really centralized form of help, but a lot of it doesn't actually make it to the right places. And the people who make the decisions ultimately a lot of times aren't the ones on the ground who are doing it. They're like giant sieves collecting, nets collecting all the funds, and then they give them out to people who they deem necessary. But a lot of times they're wrong, and so you wind up with things like giant hotels being built with the funds instead of, like houses that have, like structural support in them.
I see.
So, that's another thing that's really exciting to me, is that with Bitcoin, it's very easy to, instead of picking one generic fund to send it to instead have a directory of all these funds and then have the specific projects that they're working on and exactly what it's going to.
Sure.
And so instead of having that organization, you essentially outsource to the people who are funding it the decision-making process about what actually is worthy of their funds. And I think that, taking the concept that yes, charitable giving is good, but we should do it in a way that is efficient and that actually helps the situation. That's another thing that I think Bitcoin, and the granularity of what it lets you, what it lets you donate. Because if you wanted to, donate $5, then that all $5 could go to Red Cross, but it could also go, 50 cents to this project, $1 to this project, 50 cents to that project, $2 to that project, based on what you personally value. And it's, not really any more complicated.
I'm going to take a risk here and try to do an analogy. So right now, for example, if you want to get a film greenlit by a major studio, it can be pretty challenging to do so. And so even if you've got a great picture, and it may be the film studio then turns around and actually puts Jiggly or whatever that film was together instead of your awesome picture. Now, I can't speak exactly to how Red Cross spends its money, but if you were to say, well, Red Cross is more like a major studio and that they are making these big decisions that can sometimes not necessarily end up with as positive results, it's almost like what you're talking about. It sounds to me is almost like a crowdfunding of charitable giving, where you're taking smaller players who are legitimately demonstrating themselves online and making an easy way for that money collected. And that's exciting.
I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, absolutely. And again, with the Geely example, I think that you're right on, because again, there's a situation where the people who decide about what gets financed aren't the audience. They're not the people who at the end of the day are going to watch it and be like, man, that was the film I wanted to watch, because they don't care.
Right.
So, it's just their job. But, but yeah, talking about crowdfunding and some of the movies that have been getting funded through that method, then you're not, you completely cut out that level. You're just going straight from the creator to the audience. And so the audience can tell you, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that. So yeah, I think that that's good. And again, I have no problem with Red Cross. I have a problem with centralization, I think, because I don't think it's very efficient at actually performing the tasks that oftentimes they set themselves to perform.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rob, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. I didn't get my cool gong sound in. So maybe
we got that bell.
We got the bell from outside. So hopefully maybe I'd love to come back sometime in the future and I'll play a gong sound or some clapping. So, but I really appreciate getting on your podcast here. I've been a listener, and it's really cool to get to meet you in person.
Well, that's a very nice thing to say. I really enjoyed this too, Rob. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
After this short musical break, I'm joined by Alan Reiner of the open source Armory Wallet project. If you'd like to download the software or learn more, please visit bitcoinarmory.com. So we're here with Alan Reiner from the Armory project, which is my favorite wallet by far and the one we use on the show for pretty much everything. In this world of web wallets where there seems to be almost no development on the side of the desktop clients, you are doing something pretty unique. Why is that where you're throwing your time? Why are desktop wallets interesting to you when everybody else seems focused on the cloud?
It's mainly my background. I mean, it's a combination of background and just what was needed. I mean, you have this ecosystem of people flocking to web wallets because it's easy, but you've got a lot of people forgetting that there's a security aspect, or whether they forgot or just don't feel it necessary. Convenience is always better than security to a lot of people. But the problem is that there's so many people that really do need that security, and the solutions just weren't there. Everything Armory does is something that had been in theory for the first couple of years. People would always talk about, you could do this, you could do that, but no one was doing it. And when I got into Bitcoin, I didn't get into it originally for doing this, but when I first got into it, I started as a miner and then realized that my background was just absolutely perfect. I'm a mathematician, I'm a cryptographer, statistician, and I've spent the last 7 years developing software for a physics lab, and it just kind of all came together, and I said, hey, I can do all these things. Why don't I just do it?
And then you started down that path.
I started down that path.
So when was that?
I even remember telling my best friend, who was the one who got me into Bitcoin, we were doing mining. We didn't really understand Bitcoin that much, and I started getting into it. I remember telling him, this is going to be, I'm just going to get swallowed into this hole if I go down this path. And I was right. A year and a half later, here I am.
So how's that working for you?
It's pretty awesome. I mean, now I work on it full time, so I don't have the distractions. I've been working full time on it for the last month, and I don't have the distractions that I did before. I can now focus on really paying attention to details and getting some things that seemed lower priority, but I can stop procrastinating on those things and actually do it.
So when can I stop using Bitcoin QT? Because for anyone who hasn't used the Armory client, it requires that you essentially run Bitcoin QT to download and maintain the blockchain, and then it works off of that.
Right. So I'll give a little bit of background on that. I mean, part of the reason it's there, the way it's set up like that, is because Bitcoin, that program is basically like the gold standard of network security and blockchain security. Basically, as an interface to the network, you can't get any better than that. But it just lacks so severely on what you can do with it. So that's what Armory builds on top of. So promoting a high security client, I think high security application would be tough to do without having that robust engine under the hood. Now, one of the things I've done recently is tried to hide it so that it's still there, but it's a lot less work for the user, that it now just kind of runs in the background. And I don't know if you've used the most recent one, but now it runs in the background and does it for you. You still got to wait for the download, but at the moment, that's the price of security. In the future, what we want to do is set up something that, like Electrum does, where you have servers that are feeding that information. So basically, rather than making you run Bitcoin QT, I will run it for people. Now, it's not the most secure solution,
right,
but what it does is it bridges the gap between the people who are marginally interested and the people who want the real security.
So what's the security implication of doing that? I mean, what's the downside? Why is it less secure?
The security is because you are trusting other nodes on the network to give you correct information. By trusting other servers, they can give you bad information. If you look at the history of Bitcoin, although most of them haven't really been employed, there's a whole class of isolation attacks, which basically means if someone controls all of your peers, then they can do some nasty things.
Right.
If you're connected to one server and you're trusting them to give, to be your gateway to the network, they just isolated you.
Right.
Of course, we hope we'll have a reputation that people would be willing to do that. And our goal will be to say, here are the risks and rewards of the various modes. So when you first install Armory, it'll basically start up instantly. You can use it instantly. It'll connect to one of these servers, but there'll be a little yellow or red light to say, hey, your privacy is compromised, your security is compromised. You can upgrade.
Right.
Use the hardcore version if you really want that.
Right.
The other downside is the privacy, which is when you use Bitcoin QT, you are essentially invisible to the network. You can do almost everything that you want to do without anyone else on the network knowing about it. Right. Whereas if you're using a centralized service like Electrum does, that server and your communication to that server is broadcasting to the world how much money is in your wallet and how much every transaction that you ever executed. So there's some serious privacy implications to that. And that's where the convenience, people sacrifice security for convenience. Whereas Armory right now has sacrificed convenience for security. I'd like to have both options, and that's what I'm working on.
So, I mean, it seems like it's a teeter-totter problem where, you push down on one side and you go up on the other side. So what's the balance point? I mean, so is this federated servers balance?
What's that?
Well, you're saying that, one of the concepts that's been kicking around for, I guess, 2 years now in the Bitcoin community is the idea of federated servers and having sort of separate but equal, so that yes, you can have what you're talking about, where you've got the in the cloud, here's your data, you don't need to download 8 gigs yourself. But at the same time, if there are a whole bunch of those out there that can be chosen from, and they all are essentially competing with each other, then you kind of ameliorate some of that risk, right?
To some extent.
You seem skeptical about that.
I mean, one of the things Armory is catering to right now, at least in this current incarnation, is that this is something that the people with a lot of money, with a lot of Bitcoins and companies who really want to be secure, they're not going to settle for something that they want to have no doubt in their mind that they're using something that's giving them everything. And that's what Armory does right now. You have to do the work to get it set up, but you've got the maximum privacy, you've got the maximum security in every dimension that you can get right now.
Right.
And but we want to appeal to all users, and all those other solutions that we talk about, they all have their drawbacks, and we can debate about how significant they are, whatever. But for people who are serious, we want to have a mode that is the 100% solution for them.
Right. Well, one of the things that that Armory client implemented fairly early on was the idea of paper backups. And I got to say that personally, that saved me about 80 Bitcoins when I moved last time. And it was a rough couple of weeks because I moved out to a very slow connection. It took a long time for the blockchain to download, and it was a very painful kind of realization. So I mean, what other features are you planning on adding to the client? What things do you think need to be pioneered in?
So actually, just for the conference today or this weekend, I just pioneered a new feature which builds on that concept you just discussed. Now, just for background, with the other applications with Bitcoin QT, you have to back up your wallet every so often at the risk of losing coins. With Armory, you can print off a single sheet of paper and it protects all of your coins. That is your savior, is that if you forget your passphrase or you lose, your hard drive dies or your computer is stolen, you can always go get that piece of paper and restore your wallet. However, that's not even enough for some people, because some people, who are, especially the paranoid ones and especially companies, they see that single piece of paper as a single point of failure. And obviously that's not ideal, because when you've got a system that is totally anonymous or can be totally anonymous, there is no, oh, whoops, that money is gone. So one of the features that I just implemented was it uses something called Shamir's secret sharing. It allows you to take a secret, which in this case is your wallet, and split it between multiple pieces of paper. In this case, it could be paper, it could be USB keys, you can mix them. It's actually very flexible. And you can pick whatever security versus redundancy trade-off you want. Right now, you could print one piece of paper, but if that piece of paper goes down in a fire, your backup is gone. You could print 20 pieces of paper, but now you've distributed this piece of paper that if any one of them is found, it's taken. What this does is it lets you, say, print 5 pieces of paper, and any 3 of them is sufficient for recovering your wallet. I wouldn't go so crazy. Some people can go really far with it and do a 7 of 12 backup and do crazy stuff.
It's modifiable based on your needs.
Right. And so what you do is you've reduced it from a single point of failure to multiple points of failure, which if you actually keep them in separate places, keep one at your house, keep one in the safe deposit box, give one to your family, it completely removes attacks of opportunity where someone breaks into your house and finds finds this piece of paper, or a bank employee is snooping in safe deposit boxes. Those attacks are gone, because having one sheet of paper doesn't help you at all. Right. So you got to have multiple pieces. And at the same time, you can create as many of those as you want, and you know that any subset of them will work, so you can get the redundancy. Right. So you get this fantastic mixture of security and redundancy, and you can tailor it how you want.
So do you think that that's kind of the future of what we're going to see here, when it comes to Bitcoin and security, is that it just has to be modular, it just has to be modifiable by users to meet the level of risk that they're willing to essentially hassle through in order to...
I think that's part of the experiment here, is that Bitcoin has a usability problem right now. And right now, I'm producing the best features I can imagine that people have talked about, that they want, that the people who are really technical, who understand, who really get it, they want it but don't have it. I've produced that with this, I call it fragmented backup, where you can break your wallet into fragments and distribute it. Similarly, you can actually use the network for, it's called multi-signature transactions, where you actually require multiple devices.
You've implemented that?
I have not implemented that, but that's where I'm going.
Okay.
I say this is an experiment because my goal is to get all that stuff out there and let people figure out what they're willing to tolerate. I can set you up with the most secure way to protect your Bitcoins with whatever parameters that you want, but not everyone wants to do that. Where are people going to end up? And some fear that people will end up all on blockchain.info because they don't want to deal with security at all. We want to make sure that the solutions are there, and we might be pleasantly surprised. Actually, I know we will, because my goal in Armory is to make it easy enough that people will use it. Maybe not everyone uses it, but if the option is there, people use it and it improves the ecosystem. The fact that people have the option to secure their own is one of the things that helps Bitcoin.
Blockchain is an interesting project. I am crazy skeptical of online wallets at this point. It seems like even with two-factor authentication, it sometimes doesn't really help, especially when people are using the Google authentication. To a certain extent, I feel like giving people options to make them feel like they're more secure when in reality they're not is actually a disservice, because they feel like, oh, well, this is just as good as anything else. Do you think that there is a model for an online wallet that isn't inherently insecure?
Well, I do completely agree with the notion. You don't want to give a false sense of security. I haven't seen it so much in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but you see it in all parts of technology where people implement completely artificial barriers that make it look like there's security when it's not there.
Security theater, so to speak.
I think that the term two-factor authentication, if it's not giving you, or multi-factor, meaning you need multiple devices in order to authenticate, in order to access the web service, in order to send your Bitcoins, that term implies security. The question is, was it implemented correctly? If there's still a single point of failure because someone can hack bitcoin.info or blockchain.info website where they can get the user's account and their Google auth passwords all in one place, well, you still have a single point of failure. Not to mention the other fact that blockchain.info could go away and take your money. But just like I was saying with the backups, when there's multiple pieces that have to be recovered to use it, you're dramatically reducing the risk there. Right. Because most of these compromises are because someone guesses your password, they access the server. Armory wants to implement this, and this is very high on my priority list. Being able to actually have a wallet on your phone and a wallet on your computer. You don't need a central service. The Bitcoin network has all the little goodies under the hood so that the network will actually require a signature from each device. In that case, there really is 2 points of failure because the network itself will not rest until both those devices are compromised. That reduces a whole class of attacks, mainly the ones where you just get malware on your computer and game over because they have your wallet. It's not going to eliminate it. These are the things that we want to pioneer. We want to get out there. We want people to use it. We want people to find it, break it apart. Beyond just developing it, for Armory's sake, we want to make the tools available for people to use and build off of. Not a lot of people are doing it. In fact, I'm surprised. Maybe it's just this unique background that I come from, that I have all the math and the programming and a lot of free time that I can implement it. And the people who have most of that background but not as much attention span can now, piggyback off the work that I've done.
Right.
Because the code is all open source. You can build off it. It just seems no one else is right now.
So now that's a decision to make it open source when you have something that's being actively developed, that you're spending a lot of time on, that's feature rich, and basically that you've been working on alone. So, how is that going for you?
Well, when it was a hobby, it was going fine. You get some donations here and there. And the donations actually have been constant in terms of Bitcoins, but now that Bitcoin...
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Now that Bitcoin has gone up tenfold in value, it's actually somewhat significant. But not enough to live on.
Right.
Now that I'm working on it full time, I have someone who's helping me work on it full time for a while and really iron it out, get those multiple user modes so there's something for everyone in the application. Then we can focus. For instance, I've had a lot of inquiries about security consulting. Right now, Armory is the program that people promote.
Right.
If you want to keep your coins secure, this is what you do. There's a little bit of messing with it to get it working the first time, but once it's up, this is your solution. And so Armory has that reputation, and we want to leverage that, and we can do that through security consulting. We've gotten a lot of stuff about that. A couple companies have contacted me looking for basically features to be developed in Armory that they'd like to see in Armory, for their application, but they don't have the people who are capable of implementing that.
So has that been a revenue stream for you?
Not yet.
But that's the hope, is that, you're doing this part for free, but
I've been a purist up to this point. I've kind of resisted these
the siren call of money.
Well, to be fair, there hasn't been a ton of money looking me in the face, but for now I'm looking. Don't forget, one of my benefits is that if I can improve the Bitcoin ecosystem, I was a fairly early adopter.
Right.
So I'm not rich, but a sizable, I have some Bitcoin saved up that I got when they were $2 a piece. That's an investment now that, I use it, I spend it, but obviously it can go up in value, and I get benefit just from improving the system, even if no one's paying me.
Right.
So right now that's kind of been my driving force, and because I like it. It's easy to say that when you have a job and getting money from elsewhere, but 3 to 6 months, we'll be contacting these guys again, seeing what kind of revenue streams we can set up.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly show include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com. So you talked about secret sharing, which is, again, like you said, I think that's a concept you're pioneering. This is the first implementation into the Bitcoin protocol. Not in the protocol, but the client. Because it's there. Yeah, you could use it, but nobody has used it. So what else is coming in the pipeline that's in that same vein?
The big one is the multi-signature.
Multi-signature. So when you say multi-signature transactions, functionally what you're saying is when we're talking about like how a corporation handles their books, generally there's not one guy who's like, "Yep, I got the checkbook. Here we go."
Exactly.
So
and that's something that's very important to big players as well as little players, because the technology scales perfectly. The idea is that Satoshi, when he came up with Bitcoin, he could have just made it a simple payment system that you transfer money from point A to point B, and you just digitally sign it, to authorize that transaction. But he put in this really rich system under the hood where you can do all sorts of crazy things, some of which could be you require 2 of 3 signatures. It's very much like the Samir secret sharing, except that it's actually in the protocol. It's part of the network. The network is requesting that. The backup system I talked about was simply a feature I've implemented that I didn't require any real interaction with the network. The network actually has this capability so that you can require those signatures. This works if you simply just, and one of the things I want to make easy with Armory is to basically just put a wallet on your phone, put a wallet on your computer, and click a button, and they'll be linked, and it will require signatures from both to spend your money. It doesn't matter whether you got 2 Bitcoins or 10,000 in your account, and that all money you receive will require those 2 signatures to spend it. Similarly, say you have a big company holding lots of money, there shouldn't be a single point of failure, including rogue employees, stuff like that, where you could actually have, say, 3 different sites that individually create wallets. Those wallets can be done in their own way, offline. No one at the different sites even knows who the other sites are or where they are, yet they are mutually creating a wallet that requires a signature from all 3 of them. Just like with the Samir secret sharing, you've dramatically reduced the attack surface of that system, because now you have multiple sites to penetrate if you're going to try to break that system. And it also protects you against, say, rogue employees who, one of the issues with Bitcoin is that it's almost too good at what it does, and that,
whoops, someone stole this. Sorry,
it wasn't me. It's not really provable whether. So people who are going to be doing serious things with Bitcoin are going to need this, and again, it's something that's been talked about for years. Some people have implemented simple scripts to kind of hack it together to do it as like little toy hobby, like garage experiment type stuff. But no one has actually developed a solution. The real beauty of it is you can have people who don't even know each other. There's various applications of zero trust relationships where you might want to do this, but you could have multiple people who never have to have ever met or touched the same computer, each individually creating wallets and creating a shared wallet that requires all of their signatures to spend the money.
I think I've misunderstood what you were saying. Before, what I thought you meant was that you were creating almost, you were tapping into a protocol that would allow people with multiple wallets, that's the wrong word, that would allow companies building different wallets. But it sounds like what you're saying to me is actually that people can have multiple installations of Armory, and like I could have one, you could have one, my wife Crystal could have one, and in this scenario it would require signatures from 2 of us in order to
Exactly.
make that happen. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about individual wallet installation. So individual
Right.
people's wallets. So is
Right.
it a
So-
shared wallet?
So the idea would be each person individually installs Armory and they create a wallet. And this isn't part of Armory yet, but this is one of those holy grail features that I want to have implemented, because people have implemented it, but it's really hacky. It's under the it's scripting. It's not usable. It's not flexible. Armory is going to make this a real thing that'll actually have an interface that makes it easy to do this. That you could have multiple people each individually create a wallet, and they can send each other a piece of information that doesn't reveal any secret information, and you end up creating a shared wallet. And then network would actually enforce the rules. That the network would require 2 of 3 signatures in order for those funds to be moved.
And this is a system that's already functionally built into the protocol. It just isn't really being used by anyone.
Exactly. And so this has a lot of applications, not just what we just said. One, you could, as I said, you could have it on a phone and a computer just for yourself, so that those are the 2 people or the 2 devices that you need signatures from. You could have this situation where you have a company that splits their primary fund into 3 wallets, requires 3 signatures, and the people who have that wallets don't even know each other. They've never met. They're different geographical locations, so that no one person could compromise that system. You can also do crazy stuff like, it wouldn't exactly be a wallet, but you would have people who have wallets where they can create one-time transactions where they mutually send money to this. It's tough to describe exactly what it works, but they both send money to this mystical place called the Bitcoin network.
Okay.
And then the network holds onto it until it receives both your signatures. It's the exact same concept,
escrow.
but it's escrow. You're using the Bitcoin network as escrow. So you could actually have 2 people who are on Craigslist. The buyer can put up money into this wallet that requires a signature from both, and the money is not released until the buyer and the seller both agree to release it.
So that's already in the protocol?
That's all possible with the protocol, just no one's doing it.
See, that's a really interesting thing, because last night at the meetup, that was a question that was flat out asked, is what do we do, how do we go about creating a decentralized yet trusted wallet service that is functionally the blockchain? And the answer from Mike Hearn at the time was, go do it. But I mean, but you're saying that it's already, the bones of it are already there. It's just about building the interface.
Let me put it this way: all the building blocks are there. It's just there's nothing simple about it under the hood. And one of Armory's things that I'm trying to do is take these complicated things and bring it to people in a simpler way. And I already have all these conceptual drawings and interface designs that I've got a pretty good idea of how it's going to work. And I just gotta do it. But it does take someone who really understands Bitcoin under the hood, who spent a lot of time and understands these building blocks, because some of them are really obscure, and even someone with a really good math background may not.
Absolutely. Bitcoin is one of those things where it seems like you need to have such a complete picture of all these different disparate areas. So you're right. I mean, your skill set is really well positioned to do that. The people that you're talking to, bringing in on this, are you leading the charge? Are you the visionary on this? Is it more of a collaborative environment?
At the moment, it's just me, and I've done everything so far.
Right.
And I'm working on getting someone else who's an Android developer, among other things. He's actually a software guy who's going to help with Android app, and also just taking this mathematician's code and making it real, software-oriented best practices. We want to get someone else who's also a security expert in on these things, and get them developing for this so that we can have more resources. Because right now I'm suffering from a lack of resources. I know how to do these things. I'm still going to continue doing it. I just want to we're going to try to get some people, see if we can generate a little bit of money to pay them, and get them really, really expanding this application, because there is all this stuff that we can do, and I don't have to code it myself in order to make it happen. But I will if I have to.
Well, I think that's the right attitude to have here, is that, if nobody else is going to do it, fine, I'm just going to do it. It might take a little bit longer, but it'll be right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now.
I think that is absolutely the correct way to approach this. So it sounds like, from what we're talking about here, that we can expect development of Armory to kind of speed up, because it's been a little bit on the slow side as far, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think I've downloaded an upgraded version in maybe 6 months. Should I at this point?
Yeah, you probably should.
Okay, I probably should. I noticed that I was having a problem with transactions getting confirmed after the fork, and it was freaking me out, because I was like, oh my god, what's going on? But then I'd shut down the client, open it up again, and it was fine. So I just need to upgrade.
You probably just need to upgrade.
Okay. Well, I'll do that.
This is one of the things that it's a very rapidly developing field, and especially me as a single developer developing a rather large app, I'm constantly fixing bugs,
right.
And it's painful to hear that people aren't using the absolute latest, because I can think of every little bug that I've fixed since the version they're using, thinking, no, I can't believe they're using that, but it works. I mean, it's a solid program, and we just want to build on top of that and get all these little branches into other areas going.
So one of the other questions that I've really been wondering is, are we going to see altcoin integration into Armory? Is that something that is even interesting to you?
Are you one of the ones who emailed me about this?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. I personally, I don't really like the altcoins, because I feel like it's, the metaphor I find myself using over and over again is just like buying tornado insurance when you live in a flood zone. Mm-hmm. Because the problems that they solve don't matter until something really bad happens, and then they matter, and then maybe it works. But a lot of the things, because I continue to be concerned about the regulatory side, and so the alts can't do anything about that. So what do you think of the alts?
That's a good question that I've been trying to avoid for PR reasons, because I'm really not that much of a fan of them. I mean, I can see their value. I mean, I can see what people are trying to do with them, that they're trying to solve the little intricacies in Bitcoin that are bugging people. But I got to give Satoshi credit that he did a damned good job, with Bitcoin, that he really thought so many things through. The system's not perfect, but it is absolutely stellar at what it does. Basically, my attitude on it has been, I respect people who are doing the altcoin stuff, and I will help them adapt Armory to it, but that is far from the top of my priority list. So I've had a lot of people who contacted me, especially about Litecoin, and I basically gave them a little roadmap that said, here's a list of...
Have fun. Go do it.
Here's a list of functions you might have to change. Luckily, it's not that much... I honestly don't think it'd be that much work, but I don't really want to get into the mode of having to maintain multiple versions of it.
So your priorities with Armory are usability, security. What else? What are the other kind of core pillars holding this thing up?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, security is the top one. That's if nothing else, Armory is the security solution. There's nothing else that comes close to implementing the same security features that Armory has. With the offline wallets, being able to separate your coins onto a computer that's never touched the internet, that's just such a valuable addition to the ecosystem, and the ability to do the backup stuff like that. That is something that I never wanted to compromise on. Armory will always be the Cadillac wallet for that. What I want to do, though, is that some of the things I've neglected early on in terms of resource usage and some usability issues have now become more significant, and more people are having issues using it. So especially now that I'm full-time on it, I have time to go and clean those things up. So security first, and then usability. And the usability aspect is a lot of things. Being able to run it on any computer without any specific resource requirements, having an Android app that's easy to use, that's related, that has features that, so it can either be used by itself or with the online client, or it could be used as an offline app.
Are you going to make an attempt at iOS devices, or is that just...
I haven't heard much success on that front. So I'm not against iOS applications, just that I have an Android developer right now.
Gotcha.
And once we have that, we can work out all the kinks and everything, get that stuff set up, and doing the iOS app will be 5 times easier.
So we're at the Bitcoin 2013 conference doing this interview. I know that did you get here? You got here pretty quick. I mean, just recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So super curious. What are you most looking forward to while we're here?
Oh man, I'm a little conflicted because there's actually a lot of stuff that I've contributed to that people are giving presentations on. I kind of want to go see that just because I had something to do with it, but I also don't want to stay in my little hole. I want to get out and see some of the other things and some of the people I haven't met yet. So, is
there anybody in particular who you've just been dying to meet and you're looking to make that opportunity happen here?
It's funny that you asked that, because I was just making jokes about how everyone here has just been pixels on a forum screen for 2 years now, putting matching faces to screen name. I think that these name tags should have their forum name, everyone's forum name on
That's what everybody's been saying, right? Yeah.
But I communicate with these guys very regularly on the forums, on Instant Messenger, on IRC, and sure, face-to-face contact is great. But I feel like I really know these guys, even though I don't.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like jumping straight into like the friend part of the relationship because you've got all this context. Yeah. I guess one last question, then I'll let you get. I don't want to end on a bad note, but I'm really curious what you think the hurdles are that are most threatening to Bitcoin as we move forward through this next maybe 12-month period?
That's a really good question. I think that centralization is something that has to be very carefully balanced, and it's not something we have strict control over. Like we were talking about blockchain.info, it's a centralized service, which is kind of counter to Bitcoin's philosophy, but people use it because it's convenient. And one of the fears is that all the convenient, acceptable solutions will be all the centralized solutions, and then we're just back to where we started, and no one is using Bitcoin for its virtues that it was originally promoted for. You know, there's a whole lot of centralization that's happening just between Bitcoin mining, that now you've got these ASICs, these hardcore computing resources coming out that are controlled by not so many people, and you've got people aggregating around single wallets. I mean, there's lots of things like this where the system becomes too centralized, and then it loses the value that it had, which was that it was a decentralized system. Unfortunately, we don't have full control over that, but again, that kind of goes back to the experiment that is Bitcoin.
Aside from projects you're involved in directly, who do you think out there is a real shining example of someone who's doing it right? You know, whatever it is that they're doing, whatever their project is, who's doing it right?
I got to say that I'm really impressed with Gli.ph. Gli.ph, I think, is providing a valuable service, and I guess Coinbase now. I shouldn't just say Gli.ph, but they were the ones that have really been the most proactive in there first. It seems that there are people with Bitcoins who want to spend them in places, and they can't spend them. And Gli.ph is really, really accelerating the other side of that equation. Even if they are, you know, adding some centralization, adding a middleman to the equation, they're at least balancing the system. They're getting people to accept Bitcoin. People who don't even care about Bitcoin can now accept Bitcoin, and they never have to touch Bitcoin. Sure, they don't care about Bitcoin philosophy, but that really helps to be able to have any service basically accept Bitcoin and get the benefits of it without to get
go through the learning curve. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's something that's really valuable. I mean, in the end, we don't want to end up with just a whole nother credit card system where Gli.ph and Coinbase are the credit card companies in our new post-Bitcoin world. But at least in terms of acceleration, I think that's something Bitcoin needed.
Alan Reiner, Armory Wallet, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into this special episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Whether you liked, loved, or hated the show, we want to know what you think. Please send all listener mail to Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Content for this episode was provided by Rob Benegali and Alan Reiner. Music for this episode was provided by Jared Rubens. For links to his work, visit www.letstalkbitcoin.com/music. We've got lots of content coming up, but I can't for the life of me tell you what it'll be next, so I've decided to stop making guesses here until we can get the editorial calendar up and functional. Thanks so much for your support. If you'd like to donate to the show, please visit www.letstalkbitcoin.com. See you next time.